hustling, by doing the only thing I knew how to do, doors opened for me that I couldn't have otherwise imagined.
While other people are focused on impressing each other, people like me are winning on LinkedIn. Why? Because it's all about connecting.
I couldn't breathe if I wasn't an entrepreneur.
Welcome to the Startup Gambit, presented by HASTE and Hustle. I'm SHAUNA Arnott, founder and CEO of HASTE and Hustle.
And I'm DEVON, COO of HASTE and Hustle. Today we have Emile Studham, founder and director of performance by design. We're very excited to talk to Emile. How are you doing? Where are you, Emile?
I'm actually in Toronto.
Oh, okay.
But I'm an Aussie, as you can probably imagine.
Right. I was wondering if you were like burning the midnight oil to hang out and talk with us, and which would have been great. I would really appreciate that. But okay, before we get into things, before we find out all the amazing things Emile has done and his athleticism and of course his beautiful hair, we'll hear a quick word from our sponsor. So sit tight.
What if I'm not ready?
What if I don't have all the answers?
What if I just keep going?
What if it doesn't go as expected?
What if this setback helps me see the bigger picture?
What if I realize how far I've come?
What if I remember I'm doing the best I can with what I've got?
Today, I'm ready for what if.
Get ready for what if. Meridian, where banking feels good.
SHAUNA, Emile, welcome. Glad to be with you again, SHAUNA. Wonderful co-host.
Well, I'm so happy to have you here, Emile. I know we've known each other for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
And you've had some big things happen in the past couple of years. You became a dad, which is exciting.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I've always been really interested in what you do. I know my son even took your course,
yes,
your program years ago. And
That's
so
right.
we've talked about that. And I think one of the reasons I really wanted to have you on, as I mentioned to you before we launched here, is that, you know, as a startup founder, I think we sometimes value the leadership and the culture of our business, as we're so busy building the widgets or doing our service or whatever it is that we're starting to do, that we forget about leadership. And I think it's an essential skill. It can make or break your business. And I think it's something that people need to constantly be training in, and they need to have a really strong self-awareness about. And so I thought it would be great to have you on. And after our conversation earlier this summer, I was absolutely certain of it, that, just to come and speak to leadership and company culture and how to start that off right and how to set your company off on a great trajectory for success.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear you, first of all, that being said, I'd love for you to share a little bit about who you are, where you started and how you got into this business. And then we'll just break right into it. So go ahead.
Fantastic. Yeah, so my journey to Canada started in '99. I was a student at the University of Western Ontario. I studied kinesiology for 6 months on student exchange. And I think it was one of the first times I'd ever seen snow, particularly snow where I lived around the Essex Hall in London there, Ontario. So that was a bit of a shock for me. But prior to that, I'd become a physical education teacher. I was trained to be a phys ed teacher. I played a decent level of Aussie rules football back home in Australia. So I'd always been involved with sport, and kinesiology seemed like a good business career for me. And I moved into the education space. After my 6 months in Canada, I kept on coming back and forwards. And then in 2001, a good mate of mine said, "Hey, why don't you come back to Canada? We'll start an Aussie rules team in the league here, and you should go around to schools and teach kids how to play Aussie rules football." And so I did. I grabbed a bunch of footballs from the Australian Football Professional League, shipped them over, went to the budget rent-a-car on day one and went to hire a car. And the lady behind the desk said, "Oh, Emile, you're only 23. You have to be 25 to rent a car in Canada in 2001. So I got my Bauer hockey bag filled with footies and I jumped on public transport. And for the next 6 to 9 months, me and a couple of mates, we taught kids how to play Aussie rules football, which was a wonderful experience, a lot of hard work. And then I went home and became a school teacher. But this whole idea of building this company, teaching children in schools, never left me. I got into physical education. And then in 2008, I decided to come back and actually make it a legitimate business and actually incorporate, which we became Aussie X. And that was the Aussie experience. And we did Aussie rules football, netball and cricket. And then we went around and sold to schools. Essentially, our sport, our good on you, mate, our accents, our funny words, the kids just ate it all up. And it started mostly in the secondary sector, but then it moved into the primary elementary sector because we became known more for anti-bullying and how do we be good to our mates versus selling the sport itself. And so then in 2011, we went on Dragon's Den. We were lucky enough to go on Dragon's Den. The business had grown from 6, 7, 8 people to about 50 to 60 quite quickly. And then we got on Dragon's Den, and then all of my leadership gaps just came to the foreground. I was having to make all the decisions in the company. I hadn't built any sort of layer of management. And I was particularly not very good at having an honest conversation with the team. I was fantastic at building a really positive environment. We had lots of parties and we had a fun culture, but we struggled, and I struggled as a leader to build a high-performing culture. So I knew that I needed help. And then we got a deal on Dragon's Den. I'm sure you can post that episode. It's a bit of a funny one. But you shoot it in May, and then we went on air in November. And I knew when we went on air, things were going to get really real because people are going to know who we are, and we're going to have more people in the company, and I'm not ready to take on that load. So luckily for me, I'd been tracking a well-known guy in Australia who worked in professional sport, particularly on teaching leaders and teams how to have honest conversations with each other. And luckily for me, I got coaching from Gerard Murphy about 2 weeks before we went on air. And everything changed for me after that. I started running this program, this performance by design system into my own company. And bit by bit, I did less. The company grew. There was higher engagement, and all the stress and fear and anxiety and the loneliness that came with the leadership at the time sort of dissipated. And I ended up becoming, my team actually effectively asked me to leave the company and work in the corporate sector because I was consulting for my mates and other businesses. And I loved it. And I built another revenue line by being mentored by Gerard into this work today. And fast track today, I'm now in business with him and 2 other guys from Australia. And we're performance by design. And now I'm running the North American office of our company. So that's it.
That's amazing. That's an incredible story. And yes, we'll have to share that Dragon's Den in our links because it is quite funny and interesting. So, yeah.
It is pretty funny.
I know you kind of answered this, but I'd love to just dig down a little bit deeper and just find out where do you think that obviously you had to have some self-awareness around the fact that your leadership gaps were coming out.
Yeah.
So what took that awareness and turned it into a passion for leadership development? How did you kind of?
Yeah. The awareness piece was actually my business partner at the time, Kayla, who sort of asked me, who do you turn to when you want to talk about your challenges as a leader? And it was a bit alarming because I didn't really have anyone. So that was the first thing that I thought of. I said, well, I'm having these thoughts, but I want to be able to have this conversation. Maybe the team's not the right person. So that was the first trigger to go, I need to have leadership conversations with other leaders because once I joined, the Entrepreneurs Organization and other groups, I realized we're all going through similar stuff. So that was the first trigger. The other part was this consistent inability to have a conversation around the things that mattered to me where I saw we could be better, but it kind of came up, hit the top of my chin or the bottom of my chin, and then never came out of my mouth. So I ended up getting a really gravelly voice. I've already got a gravelly voice, and then I had these feelings in my shoulders of constant tension. I thought that if I worked harder, that would be good. If I could just get through this list, everything would be okay, but the list never goes away. And the bigger you get, the more decisions you have to make and the more honest conversations you have to have, whether that's catching the good behavior and results or the difficult conversations. They're one and the same thing from our perspective at PBD. And they were the triggers for me to go, I need help because this is not sustainable. And I even remember dreaming of jumping in a canoe and like rowing across the Pacific going, I just don't want to be here. And I'm inside my own company and I'm completely lonely. And I'd be surrounded by 50, 60 people at one of our Friday night parties going, I've got no one to talk to. And that was kind of where I went, you know what, this has got to, we're all passionate about what we do. We help, you know, at that time we helped children get active, particularly the non-active kids. We had a great social purpose. We had great energy. But I was very unhealthy, physically, emotionally depleted. So and it was a creeper, just to close on this, it sort of crept up. It just all of a sudden was, well, this is all too much. And I didn't really see it coming, which is essentially why I'm so passionate about working with teams today, because I feel that our system can really help avoid those really big crashes. You don't need to go through that to be successful. There's some real key, very simple, very practical, easy to do, but also easy not to do things that can help startups manage that growth period where you do less and you lead more. And there's an axis and there's a graph to that. And there's a real system that you can follow to that. So my pain has become my purpose for sure.
That's cool. I love to hear that. I think that's the best place for people to start. And I think a lot of business owners do start from that place of, you know, they went through something. I know that's why I started Haste and Hustle, because I was so frustrated with how to navigate through a business. And I'm like, I need resources that are accessible and easy to find. And you know, and I made so many mistakes because of all this stuff. And so it was a pain point for me too. And I think it's important when you take that energy and you flip it into something positive, I think that's when you get the best results.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thinking about energy and the body, and I really liked how you gave that description of feeling what you wanted to say or the frustrations or whatever coming up to your neck. I was like, yeah, kinesiology. Like so, you know, I was actually thinking as you were talking about, you know, the axis of the cross between, you know, things needing to get done. But I was thinking about how, you know, I guess even how I work, because I'm going through this and thinking about this, about how sometimes you know that you need to, whether it's delegate or figure out a way to do less so you can do more, you know, and you need to work with the team and be able to have those conversations. And it was really great that you said, like, I literally am taking this with me when you said those difficult conversations when things aren't going well and those conversations when things are going well are the same type of conversation. If I'm getting that right, you know, I really like that. But you know, that is lacking. And I think what I think is like, well, you know, sometimes I'm just going to do it because that explanation that comes with delegation and whatnot. No, I can do it because I'm so tough and I am so strong, physically, mentally, whatever. Right. So, but the body does tell you sometimes what you need before the mind does, right? So you're an athlete. We can see by your arms and everything. Okay, we know that from everything else, but don't mind me just messing with you, Emile. But what did you bring from your athleticism and your experience as an athlete to leadership? Like, what do you bring? And we always see that there's mindset, there's leadership. Like, what do you bring that you think, because of, you know, your athleticism and what you've built and your teamwork and everything, and even the sports you played, what do you think that brought that made you maybe better positioned than someone else in your role in the exact same spot to, you know, do the things, you know, they may not have done the same thing, but what did you bring to that table?
Yeah, great question. I mean, with Performance by Design, our system started in pro sport and then went to corporate, and we do 98% of our work is in the corporate space now. So we do bring real life examples, particularly in Australia and Europe. We've been very heavy in various sports and Olympic teams and so forth. I think the first thing that we bring for teams and leaders is a team first mentality. We often talk inside our own organization of how when we start with a team, whether it's a startup, whether it's a small, medium business, or it's an enterprise, there's often a disconnect that they don't see themselves as a team. So first and foremost, to that mindset piece, we have to help the leaders understand that they are a team and not necessarily a family, because you don't get to choose your family, right? and you don't really give up on them, do you? Like you put up with your crazy sister, and like sister puts up with me being crazy and all that, right? Whereas we want to build we care about inclusion, we care about being healthy, and we care about being high performing, right? And sometimes a player on your team who was great 3 years ago is not the right player for your team anymore. And so we have, it's a duty of care as leaders to have a system to identify that and help them move on to a greener pasture or stay on our team if they're the best player. So there's got to be first a mindset that we're a team, not necessarily a family, because I mean, Netflix is probably the world leader in that with their culture book many years ago. So that's important. Okay. And that doesn't mean we don't care for our mates and our teammates. In fact, we do care extraordinarily to the point where when they're not in the right place, we'll help them move on. I think that's very respectful for leaders. So first, that team first mentality is critical, right? Which then helps, especially startups, minimize the effect of being siloed, right? And that's when we work with an enterprise company, half the problem is that they're just working in their own thing. Yeah. They don't even know what their common goal is, right? Whereas in a startup, we kind of know what it is just because we're small enough. So that's the first thing that I think we've got to get around our head. You don't have to have the team versus family mantra, but it's that concept that's important. And then I think the three things that we've learned of our 20 years in sport, which is combined, 60, 70 years as our team, is sport understands that behaviors drive results really clearly. Mm-hmm. They understand that our internal relationships and our real talk with each other is absolutely critical. So they'll train and practice for that. Mm-hmm. And the third piece is that sport reviews performance, not just through results, but they marry behaviors with it. Okay. Mm-hmm. In fact, the great leaders actually focus mostly on their team behaviors, their relationships and real talk, and their process, and the scoreboard will take care of itself. Mm-hmm. So, but because we're so data-driven often and sales-driven in business, and the scoreboard is usually money, the paradox of that is to focus on your behaviors, your teammates and relationships, your real talk and process, and the scoreboard will take care of yourself. So, and that's easier said than done, but it does come down to the way you set everything up. And I just thank God that I met Jared in 2011 when we were 50 people, because that just, the more I did the work, the more I built relationships, the more I cared for the team, and the less I actually did, the bigger the company got and the less I did, to the point where, I sat down with Connor one day at that place on Bathurst, the diner there, the Thompson Diner, and said to my GM, Cogs, I've got to say, sorry, I don't think I'm doing anything anymore in the company. Like, I'm sorry, mate. He's like, Dragon, isn't this what you designed? Isn't this why you're doing this? You said to me the day I walked in the front door and did that interview that you wanted to create an environment where the team felt like they owned the company just as much as you did. And I was like, thanks, mate. And that comes back down to that relationship for him to say that to me, even though I guess I'm his leader and vice versa. That open real talk was kind of the light bulb where I thought, well, okay, well, maybe I move into this and build another line of the business, because he and Kayla and the team had the team under control and managing beautifully. And to be honest, better than I could. So,
but that opened like back and forth from you to them too, because I mean, at the beginning, you were trying to establish that kind of like, who do I talk to? And was this the way that like it kind of led to you being like, well, how did you describe it? Gracefully being ejected from your own company? Like, they're like, well, you're a vet, you built the team, but we're good. Were you the coach there? And they're like, you have to go on and do something else.
It was confronting and enlightening at the same time, because he was exactly right. It was I was just great. Like, I remember saying to a friend, it's like watching a soap opera. You don't know what you're going to get. Like, the business was going, you don't know what you're going to get. We don't know what the next thing or the next school. But I own I own the soap opera,
Yeah.
but I have no control over what happens. Like I'm not writing any of the scripts. It just, we built this framework. We knew who we were and what we stood for. We wanted to have an extraordinary impact on everyone we came in contact with. We built a very clear set of behaviors that would be and live extraordinary impacts. We built strong relationships by scheduling time to connect together, right, and get to know each other. And we reviewed performance using behaviors and results. And that was the simplicity of the system and the simplicity of what we do now with clients as big as Hydro One and Boston Pizza, all the way down to teams of 4 or 5 that are just trying to figure out what's left and what's right. But if you get it right early, the journey's just so much more enjoyable. Performance goes with it. You collaborate well, you innovate, and you also tend to get through adversity faster. You manage adversity quicker than your opponents and what the rest of the market. And one quick example, we went through one citywide strike, which stopped all the camps of one year we were in operation. And then there was a big teacher strike where the public sector, not the Catholic board, stopped business. We lost a few $100,000 at the time of just booked business. We called the team in. I shared the story of when Homer lost his job and they had to cut costs, and the kids came down with all the little pieces of soap into one soap ball, and the dog had to eat cat food, and Marge had her hair was falling out.
Yeah.
And we opened up our books and said, look, this is what we had booked. This is what we're doing. Us leaders are taking a 40% pay cut. We all have to take a 15%. We don't know the end of this, but we're going to, if you have to leave and go elsewhere, we will support you. We'll try and hire you back when this madness is over. Everyone looked at us and we're not going anywhere. And that was a really heartwarming moment. And then I'm really glad to say that following June, we went back to school, I think in the December or January. That following June, at the end of the year, we handed over, I think, an envelope filled with $1,500 of cash to each team member to say thank you for sticking thick, because we came back and won. And that's what I think, when you have a great, inclusive, healthy, and high-performing culture, that's what ends up happening. You have that open, honest communication, and you just stick thick like a good sports team would, right?
Right. Yeah.
I think it's important, like when I listen to you talk, I've always believed that strong leaders build leaders or train leaders within their team. And so it sounds like that's sort of what happened. You were not forced out, but you had to move on because you had built such an incredible team of leaders that then carried on your mission and your vision and could move the company forward. I think what happens sometimes in an early stage startup is you have, a founder who comes in and they appoint themselves CEO because they're they're it at the moment, and they're really good at doing their, building their thing or serving or doing their providing their service. However, they're not necessarily strong leaders. And so I think there's 2 routes, in my opinion, and you can correct me, 2 routes they can go is get trained, train as a leader. And then there's sort of like, what are are there innate skills? Is it completely trained? Or bring in a new CEO to run the company, and have that, fleshed out a little bit easier. Do you have advice for people who are in a position at an early stage? I guess really, what is the most important, or why is leadership so important at that stage, developing it early? And I think you've addressed it a little bit, but sort of acknowledging and helping people to acknowledge whether they're good and how they should train themselves.
Yeah, great question. Well, I mean, I was lucky to have Jared come in, and he worked with us pro bono just because he thought, and he had a couple of mates who lived in Toronto, so he wanted an excuse to come over from England to hang out with his mates from high school. So Jez is like, he's about 15, 18 years older than me or so. So he was our shining light. November 1st, 2011, I'll never forget it. I was very lucky to have the outside support. I mean, that was to have someone come in and so when we set up, well, he set up our framework with us. So I'm sitting next to the team and he's facilitating who we are and what we stand for, which is those behaviors. He taught us about relationships and how to build them and the differences between our leading styles and our communication styles, which is a big part. And then he took us through training and practicing real talk, face-to-face, open, honest communication. And to have the outside coach, it just meant that I was a participant next to my teammate. Now, one of our teammates, I think, was their third day in the company. Like, this is great, right? And so then the other critical piece was then, when we got to the training and practicing of real talk, the first person to receive feedback was me. And so now I'm sitting in the corridor while the team's writing a report and communicating on a form that I'm writing about myself. It's pretty much mirrored. And then I've got to come in and sit and then go, and then the team speaks to me first. This is how we describe you. We love you for this, and we think you can improve on that. But it was connected to the behaviors that we created as a team. And the big thing, to draw it all circle around, they sort of said, can you get out of our way? Like, you're in our way. You're messing things up. Like, I got kicked out of 3 standing meetings that were all process driven, like just checking boxes. And here I am coming up with new ideas, like, stupid of me, like, get out. And bit by bit, I had more time to offer my services pro bono to another mate of mine and another mate. And then that's how I kind of became trained up in this work, by living it in my own company and then consulting elsewhere. But the big thing was there was the outside support to get the structure right and live the system. And then the second piece was, if you want to become a great leader, elicit feedback from your team. They'll tell you what they need you to be. And then when you think about role modeling, and leadership, we think about leadership as role modeling. Are you displaying the behaviors that you want your team to display? And once you get clear on that, and then the team helps you identify what you're good at and what your gut weaknesses, then you can be the leader you need to be for them, right? Because it's what the team needs from you at any given time may change. And Reed Hastings, for example, in his book, No Rules, speaks really well about, he's probably the one person in Netflix that receives the most amount of feedback, not the other way around. Right. So that's been really important for my personal journey, because I just thought that my enthusiasm was good and new ideas was good, but the team didn't need that at certain times. Like, not good. Get out. Like, you're wrecking the meeting and you're impeding performance. And you sometimes don't know that until your mates tell you. So it's your job as a leader to create an environment for others to perform and elicit their feedback, so you role model leadership the way they need you to.
So when that happened, when you guys were doing that, was that, you guys were about 50 people at that point when you kind of had that?
Yeah.
And you've worked with, like you're saying, like Hydro One's huge, Boston Pizza, a major franchise, but you've worked with smaller teams too. So, okay, if we're looking at smaller teams, what did it look like from a practical sense? With like 50 people, I imagine, was that like a 1 or 2 day powwow that you took the time out for? But what if your team is, 8 people? What should we think of for a practical sense? Are we looking at saying, everybody, it's a Friday, we're going to get together and we're going to start with me? What does that look like technique wise?
Yeah. To get down sort of the granular level, it usually starts with a 1 or 2 day engagement to get an understanding. And it's almost like a diagnostic, like where are we today? Who do we want to be recognized? There's a process that we take through, which essentially helps them create their culture code, why they exist, what they stand for in values, and what are they going to reward and recognize and challenge of each other from a behavior perspective, with a focus on behavior. That gives them the culture code. Then we do a lot of work in psychometric profiling, where we help the team understand their individual differences and communication styles, which helps them build stronger relationships. And then we take time to build relationships. We share a bit more of ourselves. We practice vulnerability and empathy through a various range of exercises. And then the third piece is really training and practicing real talk, a bit like I just explained.
Yeah.
Now, when we think about culture, one misconception is that it's derived by parties, perks, and ping pong, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Beanbag
Now,
chairs and the like.
yeah, and look, I tell you, I know that more better than anyone. We used to party like crazy, but didn't have much dollars to sort of rub together. But once you break down that and go, okay, well, it's actually about the behaviors we reward and challenge of each other, we can then seem to understand that it's not a project or a campaign or something that we get and then we move on to the next thing. Culture is something that underpins everything. So it's a doing thing. You do a great culture. So once you get clarity on what you stand for, we understand each other a bit better, we practice real talk, we then incorporate systems into the team's organization, into the organization's schedule, so that we consistently review each other against the behaviors and not just the results. And then over the course of a year, we'll say to the team, let's put the tools down and do a tune-up for a half day every 120 days, where we'll review each company, each department, and the system rolls on and rolls on, a little bit like a hockey game almost, right? You have your period one, you go into intermission. You're off the ice, sticks are away. What worked? What can we do better? Play another intermission. Second intermission or period, second intermission, do it again, end the game, and that might be your Christmas end of year review, and then you do it all again.
And much of the conversation is behavior based about like, how are we marrying the things that you need to do in our actual behavior. I really like that. So, I mean, imagine you can also come into a team, big or small, and then immediately see some sort of behavior or something that's happening and start pointing out where this is going to, or where this has probably gone wrong and how you need to stop that. So like, maybe you can quickly say, let the listeners know, what are some indicators or outcomes that indicate poor leadership and some outcomes that indicate good leadership? What have you seen?
So if you go back to leadership as role modeling, which is very behavior driven, when you think about your best leaders, you kind of want to be like them, don't you? You want to behave like them, right? So we're looking for, and again, because our process is facilitated, like it's practical where the team are having the conversations. I know I talk a lot here, but it's a podcast, but in the programming, it's about helping them stay in dialogue to find those, I like to call them the metaphorical weeds of the lawn, right? How do we find the weed and get down to the root and pull the root out? Because it might leave the lawn a bit black for a little while, but it gives room for the grass to grow. If we just mow over it, the dandelions come back in 2 weeks' time, right?
Solid analogy. That's great.
Yeah. So bend your back, get the little tool that gets into the weed, and then together work out, well, what must change if we don't practice real talk, or say we have behaviors that are like we don't share information, we communicate poorly. Well, what does that look like? Well, we're slow on email reply. Communicating between departments is sluggish, if existent at all. Like, we've got to get down to what's actually the behavior that's happening. And then we just flip it and go, well, if we don't want that and it's happening now, what's the opposite? And so some great leadership behaviors that you will see, great leaders ask questions, right? They often ask way more questions than they give answers, which then we help leaders also understand that their job is to create an environment for others to perform, which means they don't problem solve, which makes you feel good, by the way. We love problem solving as leaders. In comes Emile, used to fix it, which is the buzz I had, to shifting the mindset that I'm a problem empowerer. I empower others to problem solve. That's a big one. And you can train for that. To your point before, Shauna, you can become better at asking questions. You can develop a curiosity, which is really integral. And the other thing that leaders do is in our work here, is we also help them understand what they stand for as a leader and paint a picture of who they want to be recognized as. And we often ask them, who's the leader you wish you had? Or who's the leader you never had that you wish you had? And then they can create a bit of a picture of who they want to be and their set of behaviors that they're going to role model down to their team. And then I would say that the third piece is, and again, to your point before, Shauna, we get stuck in the doing things, whereas great leaders, we will push them to conduct a one-on-one with their 6 to 7 core people once every 2 weeks for 30 minutes. And their job in that 30 minutes is to ask questions to the point where the person speaks 80% of the time and they speak 20% of the time. Because then if you're the decision maker that affects the whole company, you need to know what's going on. And I mean, Howard Schultz was the perfect example with Starbucks many years ago when the company was on the decline. He spent 2 years mystery shopping.
Yeah, I heard about that. It just went everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere. Total disguises, found out what was going on. Are they really writing your name on the cup? Are they really calling it out? Are they really playing the music? And then he was able to then go back into the so-called war room and then make decisions that helped everyone be the best they can be. And that's, as you get away from the doing, you're really setting up. And a lot of time, as leaders grow and develop, you know, a lot of your time is just this, sitting and gazing and thinking about, what does Shauna need? How can I make her life better? Oh, it's her son's birthday coming up. Maybe I'll get her a gift. And I know that he likes Aussie rules football, you know, and you do things that sets other people up to perform. And then the buzz of building your business is the buzz of watching other people grow. And that's, I think that was my personal journey.
That's a great perspective to, you know, the buzz of watching your business grow is the buzz of watching your people.
That really flips the ego, you know, because like what you said earlier on about, I think Shauna said it about, you know, like sometimes, you know, a new CEO has to come in or whatnot. And it's like, there are sometimes people that aren't selected as CEO for their startup because they can look and be like, this is all about ego. And like, if you're getting ejected, that's the word we're using, that's, you know, like that seems like a good way to combat ego, to think about it. But anyways, really, really cool. Well said.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I mean, and I've seen it a lot where, you know, CEOs of startups, you know, they start to scale and you really see the leadership gaps, just like you know, mentioned for yourself. And if they're not willing to address it, and you often find it in tech leaders, because there's just some, I don't know, there's like a correlation, I think. I'm totally making that up, between
the modern engineer
people and self-aware, you know, EQ. But I mean, regardless, they may be genius at building their app, but they can't, or building their technology, but they can't manage a team well, and they don't have that self-awareness and that curiosity and that team sort of supportiveness. And so it does become a real hindrance. And, you know, and oftentimes, you know, you talk to VCs or investors, their number one thing is like, I want to look at the team. I want to talk to the team. I want to know who the leaders are. I want to see their leadership skills, because that is typically the biggest determining factor in the success and outcome of a company. And so I think that the fact that leadership development is such an underrated topic and skill, because it does seem a little, it doesn't necessarily seem tangible at first. You know, what's tangible? Well, sales are tangible. You want to make money. But leadership doesn't necessarily seem tangible until you're in a position where your leadership has screwed you. And
took the words right out of my mouth. That's it. Yeah. Everyone, not many, and I'm not going to cluster wide net, but there's not a huge amount of companies doing culture right, because they don't actually know the steps to get there. They still throw money at parties, perks, and ping pong, but everyone knows what a poor culture feels and looks like.
Yeah, for
right.
Sure.
And until it comes smashing down upon you, and then you're like, okay, I don't know the way out. Well, the way out is to stop doing and to start connecting with your people and understand what's really going on. And for your techies that you mentioned there, Shauna, because they are often very task driven, you know, which is part of the profile work that you've got to do using DISC or insights and so forth, understanding that, you know, there's life in polarity. So a high IQ person often means that the higher the IQ, often the lower the EQ, which is building relationships. So the one great thing about working with tech companies, which we do, and engineers, is once they figure out that that's the right thing to do, which is build relationships, get out of the way of their people, conduct one-on-ones and build relationships with their team, they are very smart. And then they go, ooh, that's what I have to do to get good results. So it just takes a little bit of rejigging what drives culture and what drives performance, and then essentially systematizing it, if you will. Because it's not an exact science by any stretch. We're humans, but there are systems and process you can put in place. And I'm not a systems and process guy. I'm the relationship guy. And if I can learn systems and process, then anyone can.
I am the same. And I feel like even your story, is resonating with me as well, because I feel like there's, I see so many gaps, and I've studied leadership. I went through leadership programming, and, I've done a lot of research and work on it, but I feel like it's a constant battle, a constant learning cycle, and at every stage of the business. And as new people come in, you have to learn new skills, and you become more aware of new things. And then it's so I think, I guess really what I want to know, I'm sorry if you guys can hear my cat. She's
yeah, I can.
My printer went off before, so
guys have a live podcast. We one of the final things I really wanted to give to the audience here is there a way, or is there some type of audit? And I know you've kind of definitely gone through this, but is there like a few kind of core audit questions or tasks that an early stage leader can start to ask themselves to start putting themselves on the right path towards developing a strong team and figuring out whether they themselves are strong leaders and that sort of thing?
Yeah, good one. Yeah, great question. I will dovetail back a little bit. I think number one, as I think I said before, understand yourself and what you stand for. So by that, I mean, I would recommend you go and do your DISC report or your insights discovery or HDBI. Get a personality profile of yourself so you can see where your core strengths are. And strengths are different to skills. Strengths are what you're naturally good at, right? And your skills you can develop. But, I'm never going to be an NBA basketball player, right? Like I don't have the height and I don't have the skills, but I can get better at basketball. But I could be, hopefully, a world-class facilitator and culture coach for startups, because I've been there. I love it. I love people. People tend to like me, especially in North America with an accent. That's pretty cool. So I have a natural strength of enthusiasm, right? Like I don't really need to get motivated to be enthusiastic.
I know what that's like. Trust me. Don't worry. I'm there with you. Yeah.
But get me to move data from cell C7 to B8 on an Excel, and my brain just goes in, well, what am I doing? So I'm never going to be a great computer programmer, right? So understand yourself and then ask yourself some key questions. How do I want to be described as a leader? What are the words? What are the sort of describing words I want to be known for? And at the end of my time here, the team will go, you are SHAUNA, you DEVON are boom, boom, boom. Then ask yourself, well, if I want to be known as that, what do I need? What are the behaviors I need to display? What do I want to role model so that I will be recognized? Because your values, essentially the descriptive words are your values and your actions are your behaviors. So your actions are what get you described as your values, right? But values come to life through behavior. And that's the other problem with a lot of corporations. They keep it at values level where boom, boom, boom. But if we don't know what that looks like in clear team behavior, then it can be ambiguous. Discipline to one team member might be getting up at 4 a.m. and doing a 2-hour walk and getting to work an hour early. For another team member, it might look like just getting there within 10 minutes of 9 o'clock. Right. Yeah. So what does discipline look like? Then you've got a bit of an idea of, and then to second that, get an accountability mate, get someone who else is a leader and get a structure where you have a one-on-one and you just talk about how you're tracking as a leader, and even better, take it to your team and ask them, am I living these behaviors? Right. That's a a really good start as a small company leader of the company. And if you're in partnership, do it with your teammates. Do that exercise with your teammates.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think we need to do that on.
Yeah, I literally wrote that down, and I'm like, I might have to call up Emile and be like, okay, what was that last thing? Or re-listen to this. I'll let you know. But I will. I think we're gonna do that. Let's do that the what do we want to be seen as, and what behaviors do we need to exhibit? That's great. That's a great start.
We just set up this podcast with you so that we could get a free hour of consulting for Haiti.
Thank you very much. It's been great.
So thanks. It's been great.
Oh, you'll get the invoice from my finance team in a few hours when Australia wakes up.
My favorite part of this whole call so far is the part where you were talking about, having someone sitting around thinking about my needs. I was like, wow, that's
that's what I do.
Yeah.
That's what you do?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah. It's honestly, it's a beautiful place to put your mind. Like, I mean, it's funny because when we built Aussie X, we had this saying, which your son would have learned, called "Good on you, mate." I still wear the wristband. I'm not even part of the company anymore, but "Good on you, mate" was our catch cry. "Good on you, mate," we turned it into a core value of the energy you give off is the energy you get back.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything in our program centered around, a handshake, which was a thumbs up and a bump of the knuckles and say, "Good on you, mate." And we would ask the kids, who likes giving a good on you, mate? Yeah. Who likes getting one? Yeah. And you're like, okay, so you're telling me that you can feel good by making someone else feel good. And that was basically the energy of the whole sports, the program itself. So it didn't matter what sport it was. That was the lesson, because sport, no one cares about Australian sports. We care about our children connecting and having strong relationships because it's a really good indicator of our health and vitality of our life. But
I care about netball.
Therefore, yes, that's beautiful.
Grew up watching my mom play that.
So if we take that as almost like the that job of leadership, then you're going to be in a pretty good spot because you're going to be thinking about setting people up as opposed to, get out of the way, I can program faster than you. The challenge is at the speed that we move, that we don't have the time to coach. We don't have the time to build relationships internally. Well, I say BS to that. You just got to have, I guess it's that, from my perspective, it was the outside support to have someone there going to, and I just followed the system. So that coach perspective when you're young is pretty critical. It's difficult to build culture and systems from the inside out.
That's great. Well, I think it's so interesting. I feel like we could talk about this forever. And
definitely.
I've been fascinated by leadership for quite a while. I took a program called Leadership Niagara, I don't know, about 6 or 7 years ago. And it was for a year. And so interesting. And I subsequently have read so many books on it, and I do find it very fascinating. So I appreciate your insights. We are wrapping up here. Unfortunately, we don't get to listen to your awesome accent for too much longer. But I want to ask, some of our standard questions, which we love to ask everybody. So I'll ask the first one. If you could have dinner with anybody, who would it be, dead or alive?
Dead would be John Lennon. I was a big Beatles fan, but also particularly fond of how he took a stand, and his brilliant creativity matched with his drive. Alive, let's stick with, look, it's cliche, but Richard Branson is someone I've enjoyed watching, and I think when I get to 60 years old, I might look a bit like him.
You definitely have a Branson look. Maybe you're a long lost child.
And I think he's got that quote, treat your people, or coach and train your people like they'll never leave. And there's something like that. I've lost it now because I got excited about Branson, but
we'll get it. We'll find it.
Yeah, find it. And the thing is, the way he focused his attention on his people, that just drove astronomical, results. That's the epitome of sort of, I guess, our system. It's build your people up and then let them run.
I think it's something like I think it's something like train your people so that they can leave, but they never
Yeah.
will. or
And then
something.
treat them like they'll never leave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. That's basically
Mhm.
sort of the essence of our work. So he would be the one that I'd like to pick his brain for. Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
What's the next question? Is there a second question?
So
Yeah, sorry, Devon.
sorry, I was just thinking about that actually. The next question is like one that I really, really like. If you weren't doing this, what would you be doing?
I wrote down cartooning. I used to draw a lot of cartoons as a kid, and I had a character called Horace the hyena, and he lived in the San Diego Zoo, and he was too smart. They
awesome.
couldn't what do you call it? They couldn't cage him because he was always escaping. But on the side, he was also detracting a particular investor who wanted to buy the land. So he would fool the criminal trying to get the land, and he would play tricks on the zookeeper, and he had a whole little array of mates. So maybe I would be drawing Horace the hyena.
That is well thought out.
You should do that and draw it for your son.
Yeah.
That would be funny. I love that. Okay, last question, and then we'll let you go. You could give any advice to founders at this stage. What would it be?
We've covered a fairly big circle, haven't we? I think I'd have to go back to the understanding yourself and what you stand for as number one. Like actually spend the time and then elicit the feedback from those close to you. Am I, when you look at this, so for example, here's our code in the background here, right? And I could, don't take the chance out of culture, and there's our behaviors and our values, go to your peers and go, where am I strong and where are my areas of growth? I think that is a very important piece, because you can't see the back of your heel when you're trying to improve your running speed, right? So you need your mates to help you out. So that would be number one. As far as a system or a structural change is, I would recommend that leaders do a sit down one-on-one with their core 4 to 5 people, depending on how big they are, in a perfect world, once every 2 weeks. But if you can't, then at least monthly for an hour. It was Andy Grover, the famous Intel CEO, who said one quality 30 to 45 minute one-on-one will get you 80 hours of quality work.
That's interesting.
Wow.
Right. And again, it's about that. What are you seeing that I'm not seeing? What do you see working? And just checking in on, are we living the behaviors that we want to reward, and are we challenging the right ones, and have we got the right people on our bus? Because if I even fast track to the work we do with clients now, probably within the first 120 days, one of the key things is getting clear on who we are and what we stand for, but then identifying through that code, have we got the right people on our bus? And that's about behavior, behavior, and not just great results, because we can see culture killers who get great results but behave poorly internally, really hurt the organization. And we also see the lovable low performer stay in the company too long when we should be setting them free to go elsewhere and enjoy their life, because no one turns up to work wanting to do a crappy job.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that was really good advice. I'm so happy to have had you on here, and I think you have so much wisdom to share. And so one thing I'd love for people to be able to reach out to you. Do you want to share a little bit about where you can be found?
Absolutely. So we work all over North America, which is wonderful. I love traveling, and we can sort of travel again. But we can be found at performancebydesign.co. So we've got our office. I'm living in Toronto, but travel all over the place. I have my LinkedIn page, Emile Studham. I'm sure you'll post that up.
Yep.
We have some really cool content on our website under our news section, and we also have a YouTube show, the Culture Couch Live, and the Culture Corner. The Culture Corner is our North American version of our show, and it also goes on to podcasts. So to consume our content, our website's pretty solid for that on the pop bar there. And please, if anyone's got any questions, reach out. I can do a 30-minute complimentary culture and performance diagnostic for any of your listeners, and that will help them go through that, almost that first phase. Who we are and what we stand for. I can take everyone through that exercise. And the great thing about working here in Ontario as well is there's government funding for our work. Teams only pay about 35% of the fee of our work. So even though we work with the Hydro Ones and so forth, startups of under 100 people get huge government subsidies. So that's also a bit of a bonus for your listeners as well.
Oh, that's great. Well, we'll definitely link to all those things.
Yeah,
And, thank you. That's such a great offer for our audience. I definitely recommend people take you up on that. And so thank you again, Emile. It's always great.
Pleasure, guys.
Always great to listen to your voice, and but mostly all the great things you have to say. So thank you again, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Thanks so much, guys. Great to see you. Thanks, Devon. Cheers, mate.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Shauna.